Motion carried. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
This tired and out-of-touch government is failing to deliver on health care. Last week, the fire department had to write up St. Paul's Hospital for fire code violations. And then last week, 118 healthcare workers wrote to the Premier with their dire concerns. I quote, "We've been crippled by the increasing number of medicine patients being boarded in emergency. We've been over 100% capacity 100% of the time for many months." Mr. Speaker, healthcare workers have raised these concerns with this government time and time again. When will the Premier work with healthcare workers to fix the crisis in our emergency rooms?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a number of things. I think the Saskatchewan Health Authority was the operator of the health care system that we have in Saskatchewan. They receive just under, I think, $4.5 billion of investment on behalf of Saskatchewan people to deliver health care in our communities across the province, Mr. Speaker. I believe they were out communicating on this very topic this morning with respect to some of the initiatives that they are currently undertaking today, Mr. Speaker, that are going to help alleviate some of the pressures that we have, specific to a few hospitals, Mr. Speaker, but in Saskatoon and Regina, our urban centres, but also across the province, Mr. Speaker. What they are most looking to do over the course of the next number of weeks, Mr. Speaker, and then what they're committing to do over the next number of months, Mr. Speaker. It includes many of the asks and solutions that were provided by a number of healthcare workers, Mr. Speaker, including the addition of beds, addition of ambulatory care, Mr. Speaker. And so we appreciate the input from our frontline healthcare workers, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, going to do everything we can to ensure that the Saskatchewan Health Authority at all levels, including the management levels, are engaging with those frontline workers, Mr. Speaker, so that we can continue to offer the care that Saskatchewan people expect in their community, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, despite all of that, this Premier, this government, is failing to listen to healthcare workers. Now, this weekend they cooked up a plan of their own, but it's doomed to fail. Doomed to fail because they aren't listening to the very healthcare workers who see the problems in our ERs every day. They need more staff and they need more space to ensure that their patients get the dignified care that all people in this province deserve. Why won't this Premier sit down with healthcare workers and come up with a real plan to fix the crisis in our emergency rooms?
Recognize the Premier.
We ought to send over the SHA, or the Saskatchewan Health Authority news release, Mr. Speaker, because a number of the things that were in that news release that the Saskatchewan Health Authority is currently working on or committed to working on in the very near future include the temporary deployment of existing staff, Mr. Speaker, to address some of the challenges that we have in certain areas, enhance weekend staffing at Saskatoon facilities, add temporary emergency department staffing, Mr. Speaker. That's all adding staff to ensure that they're able to deliver on the 84 additional beds that they are bringing into service, Mr. Speaker, the additional ambulatory care that is coming into service, Mr. Speaker, and all of this is in the scope of the broader investment that the government is making, Mr. Speaker, that the Saskatchewan Health Authority ultimately will operate in the case of, for example, urgent care centres that are going to alleviate some of the pressures that we have in our emergency rooms, never mind the mental health and addictions entrance point that we will have in those particular centres, Mr. Speaker. The expansion of the Victoria Hospital in Prince Albert, Mr. Speaker, is going to be a significant addition of beds to our provincial capacity, Mr. Speaker. Again, provincial investment there to support the operating arm of our health care system in this province, Mr. Speaker, which is the Saskatchewan Health Authority.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, all of this is in the scope of the failure after failure on the healthcare front from that government. This is a tired and out-of-touch government that's been in government for 16 years. The crisis is on them, and this is their record, Mr. Speaker. They've allowed short staffing to become the norm in our hospitals right across this province. And instead of spending time to fix the crisis in our emergency room, we saw this Premier call an emergency session to deal with kids' pronouns. Mr. Speaker, again, This is a government clearly not focused on the things that matter to Saskatchewan people. When will this Premier accept any responsibility for the mess that the Sask Party has made of our healthcare system?
Recognize the Premier.
Education policy that was passed by this government in a response to a policy, Mr. Speaker, that was no longer active. Mr. Speaker, it's a policy that ensures that parents do have a right to be involved in their child's education and their child's life. Mr. Speaker, with respect to our healthcare centres today that are operating, I would add, with 5,000 additional nurses, and they did the day before we took government in 2007, 1,000 additional physicians, Mr. Speaker, a couple hundred physicians recruited this past year, Mr. Speaker. There definitely has been the investment, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding some of the current challenges that we're seeing, not just in Saskatchewan, challenges across the nation of Canada, even in BC, in the NDP BC, Mr. Speaker. There are challenges in their healthcare system, Mr. Speaker. Those challenges are across Canada. That's why I last week we were in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, meeting with the other premiers to work on what is working, whether it be in the human resource health human resource plans that we have, Mr. Speaker, comparing notes with other provinces, and certainly working with the other premiers to build a Canadian system, Mr. Speaker, a Canadian healthcare system that is strong and vibrant, Mr. Speaker, from coast to coast to coast. Those are precisely the discussions that we were having on what is working in our provincial investment, where that is working, Mr. Speaker, and most certainly sharing those ideas with other Canadian provinces.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier's sunny ways are not going to fix this, and neither is the self-congratulation. This is a government that clearly is not focused on what matters to families. They're not focused on health care, and they're not focused on the cost of living. Families are paying more in this province as a direct result of that government's tax and fee hikes. But this Premier isn't offering any real relief for families. But, Mr. Speaker, soon he'll have a chance. The member from Regina Rosemont has just submitted a notice of motion calling for a 6-month break on the gas tax. This would save families in this province an average of $350. Will the Premier finally act and give families this much-needed break on the price of gas?
Recognize the Premier.
In addition to the unprecedented investment that we're seeing in this province in healthcare, Mr. Speaker, which is only possible due to the strength of our provincial economy, Mr. Speaker, it has been very much the focus of this government, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have some of the lowest utility rates in the nation of Canada, Mr. Speaker, of which today Saskatchewan, through our Crown Utilities, is offering the second lowest bundle of utility rates, Mr. Speaker, in the nation. We're under NDP BC by $700, a family of 4, Mr. Speaker, under Quebec by $1,300, under Ontario by $3,700, $4,700 lower than Nova Scotia annually, and $5,500 less than Newfoundland, Mr. Speaker. Very shortly, I would ask the Leader of the Opposition, there is going to be a piece of enabling legislation put onto the floor of this Assembly, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that Saskatchewan families are equivalent to Atlantic Canadian families and are not submitting the carbon tax on their home heating fuel, Mr. Speaker. Is the Leader of the Opposition going to support that piece of legislation?
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I think we've been pretty clear on our position on the carve-out on the heating tax. But, Mr. Speaker, right now in this province, Saskatchewan people are struggling more than people in any other province. We lead the nation in mortgages and arrears because of this government's choice to hike costs for families. This tired and out-of-touch government could choose to act and offer relief, saving hundreds of dollars for families. But, Mr. Speaker, it sounds like they're choosing not to. Instead of acting to put money back in the pockets of families, this Premier decides to spend $1 million on a pavilion in Dubai. Why won't this Premier scrap the tax on fuel and help struggling Saskatchewan families today?
Recognize the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I went through the savings that we Saskatchewan families incur under using our Crown utilities, Mr. Speaker, the second lowest utility bundle in the nation of Canada. In addition to the investment record investment in healthcare that we have seen over the last decade and a half, Mr. Speaker, we have been able then also to remove 112,000 low-income families, low-income individuals from the provincial tax rolls altogether, Mr. Speaker. The way that we are able to do this, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we are encouraging an environment for investment which results in a strong and vibrant economy, which results in jobs, Mr. Speaker. And the way we're able to do that, most notably this last week being recognized by the Canada-Indian Business Council, Mr. Speaker, is by to engage with our customers around the world. Engaging at COP28 is most certainly just what we are going to do, Mr. Speaker, provide a platform for Saskatchewan industries to tell their story, not just about what they're producing, but about how they are producing some of the most sustainable products that you can find on earth. And, Mr. Speaker, what is the goal of that investment? The goal behind that investment is to continue to ensure that this past month we had 6,600 more jobs created in this province, that is the rate of job increase in this province, Mr. Speaker, not just a one and done.